Hello, this is Scott Jentz. Welcome to Sandbox Stories. Hello, welcome to this Sandbox Story, which is an interview with Dr. Masoud Nafey. This guest is an optometrist that's lived a very involved career in technology. He's done work with some of the industry's biggest software efforts at VSP and EssilorLuxottica. He's been part of the Stanford Vision Performance Center. And if I understand, we're going to learn today a little bit about his latest ventures. I can't wait to hear his stories. Dr. Nafey, welcome to Sandbox Stories.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Scott. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to talk about it and talk about the things that really get me going and things I'm passionate about.
Well, I think that will get the audience going too. As we get rolling, let's start with how you look at opportunities in optometry today. I've heard you say that ODs look outside the industry to broaden their views. I have to guess that you can give me more insight on what that means. Like, we are so focused on what we do that sometimes we forget what is going on out here that could affect what we do. Tell me a little bit more about what are the opportunities ahead of optometry that we might not always look at as practicing ODs.
Yeah, I think we're very patient-centric as a profession. I mean, that's what we were designed to do. We were trained to do that. And when we start to take off our provider hat and put on our CEO hat, we start to look at what is outside of our industry affecting our industry. You could see that a lot of people are trying to get into the vision space. The big tech is trying to get in our space. They're already in our space. As you can imagine, there's Meta, Apple, and others that are coming out with virtual reality headsets and others. And then also, if you think about how our patients are, the behavior of our patients, they're not really acting like patients like they used to. They're acting more like consumers. So then we have to look at the Amazonian consumerism world and these other things that are going on outside of our space as healthcare professionals to say, okay, this is going to impact our business, or else there's just a huge opportunity for others to come and do that work for us. As an optometrist, we have to think about what our patients are going to come and speak to us about, right? I heard about this, I heard about that, or I have a pair of this, or I use this in my daily life. How does that affect my vision? And we have to be able to come up with answers. I think there's that component of it because, a lot of what we do in practice is we care about our customer, and our customer is our patient. So they're going to come to us with new problems, things that maybe we don't talk about, whether it's our CE or whether it's in our industry. We just don't talk about it, but it's out there, and people are, even when you think about low quality eyewear, and people are out there using these things, and then they will probably bring it to our practice and have us have that conversation with us, and it's our job to make sure that they're getting the best care and the best products that aligns with the care that we're trying to provide. So there's that piece of it. But then I'm also speaking about beyond the exam lane. If you just think about our business, 60 to 70% of our revenue comes from optical, and you think about how those patients behave. And I think it's changing, it's shifting. You talk about how e-commerce has come in, folks like Warby Parker have come in, Zenni have come in, and then you think about, okay, why would the patient and now consumer purchase from you and not from others? And that's a huge problem in our industry that we have to tackle and really have conversations about what we need to do to solve that problem, and what tools do we need to build or start using to ensure that we have more success and the retail side of our business too.
I get what you're saying now, right? The light bulb for me is that these patients of ours present to us with things that if we don't know enough about them, we just dismiss it. We just say, well, that's not any good, or don't use that. The reality is they're buying Apple headsets. They're dealing with Ray-Ban Meta sunglasses. They're thinking about consuming products from the outside. And as opposed to dismissing it, your suggestion is our opportunity is to actually dig in deep and learn so we can be great advisors to those patients. I get that.
Well said. Yep.
Okay. All right. So one thing I know that you believe is that ODs should be a little more thoughtful about connecting offline to online shoppers. Can you tell me what that means?
Yeah, so I think about this really around. This is actually a problem in greater retail if you think about it. Again, like outside of the exam lane, we most big of the big retail chains, most of them have more data on their online shoppers than they do on their offline shoppers. They don't know what's going on in their store. They don't know what patients are, or in this case not patients but consumers, are putting in their cart and then not actually purchasing when it comes to the register, right? So that kind of like what goes in the cart, what is actually removed from the cart, why is it removed from their cart. There's an idea behind their intention, their behavior, and their action in store, which is offline. They know that online. They know about what is actually put into the cart, what their average transaction size is, and then what's actually removed. They have data on that. When they click delete, or take from two items quantity to one, how do we bring that to what's happening in the store as well? And I believe there's a huge opportunity in our industry, especially on the optical side, to be able to have technology that can tell us what's happening.
That's interesting. I mean, I think about patients who look at non RX sunglasses and don't want to tip their hand that they might be interested for fear it's just going to cost too much. And in some ways, they're putting that in their cart and taking it out of their cart without us even knowing. How do we provoke them into that conversation?
Well, it really depends on which tools are out there. I mean, there are tools out there, whether it's beacon technology, sensors, infrared sensors, and whatnot, that can tell you. I don't think this exists in our industry yet, but I believe tools can be made and produced to solve for this, where it really has to do with hardware, less with software, but it is a mix of both.
Hmm.
But really, so like, let's say somebody goes to an optical, picks up a pair of frames just to try it on, but then decides, I don't want it, whether they looked at a price tag or whether they looked at the brand or whether they just looked at how it fit on their face, they didn't like it, and they put it back. How do we capture that data? There's a lot of data to be captured there. And I think that's really, I believe, where the future of retail is going to go. And for us to have tools that can help our business make better business decisions, data-driven decisions, I think that'd be a very interesting problem to solve.
Yeah, and I think that breaking down that barrier between patients' wants and their aversion to buy from particularly independent ECP practices
Yep.
is not just technology based, but it's also psychology based. We have to think about how to get people to either write down or commit to verbalizing to us the things that they might want to examine and not feel the pressure of a sale that needs to be closed today, but that we look at the continuum of their time with us. And I'm no expert on that, but I think you're right. If you can combine that with technology efforts, seems like we could increase the throughput and make patients happier with the decisions they make to buy.
Yeah, 100%. But also there's, if they are making price conscious decisions, in our space, we also have a lot of vision care plans and vision care organizations that consider our patients their members. And a lot of times their plans cover only one pair. So we actually like to measure, right? In our optical, we like to measure multiple pairs, or they bought glasses, they also bought contacts, but the insurance doesn't cover both, right? These managed care plans. So if it is a price conscious decision that they're making, then how do we lower that barrier of entry? And I believe there are tools out there that we can adopt as well when it comes to helping that patient or that consumer, and that time, in that moment in time, it's a consumer, not a patient, frankly. And how do we get them to have opportunities to buy multiple products from us so they can get exactly what we prescribe to them to begin with?
I want to shift to what you are aiming to do today and tomorrow. You've been telling me recently that you've had some exciting opportunities come your way. Can you give us a sense of what your work is today?
Yeah, I do some things outside of our industry for a wealth fund where I'll do some due diligence on AI companies and investments they want to make, as well as retail-based companies. So that's why I get kind of a broader perspective of what's going on in greater retail outside of our industry, and of course, healthcare and health in general. What I like to do, and I'm planning to do in our industry, especially as we get into 2025, is really focus on telehealth solutions that are more A to Z, end-to-end solutions that are telehealth solutions that maybe is not really around just providing virtual care, but also maybe there's an e-commerce platform that can also be tied to that in a very integrated way. I think about that a lot, and I also think a little bit about you know subscription model, membership model type of business models in our industry that really could be either a play on retail itself or a play on the practice itself that can be kind of you know a different way for patients to think about their relationship with their ECP.
One of the things, if I tie a few of the things you said already in this interview together, that you're driving toward is this idea that consumers are feeling more in control of their healthcare decisions. That means how and when they choose doctoring, also with products, how and from whom they choose their products to be purchased. And it sort of gets into an interesting area where I think doctors from the day of our paper charts have always felt like if the patient's had an exam in our location in the last year, they're our patient. And I think by the year 2030, we're going to see this shift to the patients kind of are like, I might rent my time with you and I might rent my time with somebody else. And I'm going to make choices that are sort of me centric, not you centric, doctor. And I can see that creating conflict. And I'm curious if any of the things you're doing improve that patient connection to the doctor, make it harder. How do you see, the importance of the patient feeling connected to a doc?
Yeah, it's funny when we think of ourselves, and we take so much pride in all the training we've done, and how much we truly care about our community, and how much we truly care about our patients, and some of those patients reciprocate that loyalty back to us. But that doesn't mean that they will reciprocate that loyalty outside the exam lane. And there's this other part of our business, and there was a statistic I read, I believe 5-ish years ago, that something astonishing, like 11% of our patients come back and get an eye exam with us if uh, if they didn't purchase glasses through us.
Hmm.
Only 11%. So in other words, if wherever they make that purchase decision is where they'll probably get their care next time too, for convenience. I'm already there. That's where I like to make my consumer decisions. So I'll get my care there too. There's a doctor in house. So there's something to that effect. And I know we take so much pride in the care that we provide for our patients,
We should.
but I think it's important for us to open our eyes and say, all right, we need to take that much pride in the other part of our business as well. So then we can ensure that we can provide end-to-end care for our patients. So they don't think of their eye care, eyewear products as just a product and more of a medical device, which is what we want them to know. It's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've got to adjust our minds to our patients being important to us when they're there and that we don't own every chapter in their book. I guess we are primary care providers, but we got to be okay with being doing the best we can for them when they're there, and assuming, to your point, that they'll reciprocate that with referrals and return visits. And it might not be every time. I hate to say it that way, but with increased telehealth offerings, perhaps there will be a convenience movement that will make us sometimes less convenient and not the choice in a given year, and not make a patient feel guilty or bad about that. If they come back eventually, they're at 100 years of life. We can see them every now and again. I'm not suggesting that should be the way it is. I just think that might be the way that consumers work with us in the future. I don't know how you think about it.
That's exactly. I mean, I do think about it that way, and I think about this a lot because if you look at outside of, let's look at primary care physicians that are not eye care physicians. It's happening in the PCP space, right? You have organizations that are like One Medical who just got acquired, right? Those guys became huge by offering convenient care, convenient access through a membership model for primary care visits, right? Whatever those visits are for. And you think about how that can easily come to our space. I mean, even when you think about our processes and how much time it takes Like, do we really provide the most efficient way to book an eye exam? Some practices do, some don't. Do we really offer access to our patient like we do to our family members? Hey, call me if there's anything that happens. Some practices don't. When their glasses come back, 10 to 14 days or whatever. First of all, is that really the most convenient for that patient? And then also, when they come back, is it a 15 to 30-minute process to pick up their glasses? These are the things I think about. These inefficiencies that if we don't address, someone will address.
Mhm. Yeah. I want to ask you also, a few years ago, I know you got involved in the metaverse movement. And
Yeah.
I want to have you tell me a little bit more about that. Why did it seem so likely to you that this is where humanity was headed? And are we still headed there?
Well, Gen Z is definitely in the metaverse. I mean, if you think about the metaverse, well, we have to define it first.
Yeah.
Metaverse is defined as beyond universe, so beyond kind of our world today. What we're doing right now on this webinar, on this podcast, this is a metaverse experience. We're virtually connecting, something beyond a physical connection. Virtual reality headsets is a form of being in the metaverse, augmented reality, mixed reality. And I thought this maybe 10 years ago. I said, I believe one day we'll stop using our mobile devices via iPhones and Samsung Galaxies and such, and start thinking about technology through our eyewear, since we're wearing it. The oldest wearable in the world is right here. So if you think about it, it's already something that hundreds of millions of consumers are wearing. So then how do we tie technology to that? So I think about that, and that's kind of why I was interested in the metaverse to begin with. But then when you start thinking about the future and the future generations that are going to have the most amount of disposable income, it's Gen Z coming up, right? Right now, I believe it's millennials, and of course there's all this money from folks who are retiring with the baby boomers. But the next set of consumers are Gen Z consumers who are making a lot of purchase decisions in virtual worlds. Actually, there was another statistic that said 90% of Gen Zers who go into a virtual world, 90% of them come out with at least one purchase. And that's a crazy statistic if you think about it. So I was very fascinated with the idea. I actually created the first optical. And what I was thinking is, if people are going out there and buying skins, as they call it in the esports world, skins for their avatars, right? They're buying glasses, they're buying outfits, they're buying, headwear, whatever it is. Why can't we translate that to a physical purchase? So if you buy something for your avatar, something that looks like the newest pair of glasses, whatever brand, why don't we just drop ship a physical pair to that real human being as well? It's a different way of thinking about retail. It's a different way of thinking about revenue opportunities and just opportunity generation in general for our industry.
And having kids, myself, in those generations that are talking with their friends by gaming with headsets on, and that's how they meet in the evening.
Yep.
I get what you mean. And when I see them buying subscriptions to things and electronic connections, it doesn't necessarily have to be lived through a VR device, does it? It's more of a how they connect and then how they consume. I think that's really an interesting way to think about it from an eye care perspective. It does have opportunity. I suppose, though, that experiencing it is going to be optimized at some point through enhancement of these wearables with cameras and other devices in them, like these Ray-Ban Meta sunglasses that have been promoted so heavily by EssilorLuxottica lately.
Yeah, and that technology is just going to get better, right?
Yeah.
So then, I mean, even I believe Mark Zuckerberg said something a few years ago about, what we're creating is going to be the future of our mobile devices, and I believe that years ago too. I believe that there's an opportunity for our industry to have all the access to our technology through a pair of glasses, and I believe the technology will get thinner and more invisible. The best technology is invisible. So it'll be something where it's less noticeable. Everything right now is a little bulky, if you ask me. So the hardware is going to get better. The software is going to get better, and the opportunities in terms of what products can offer is going to get better. I think there's a lot of untapped opportunities in that space, which is maybe a little too forward thinking, frankly. But it's good to at least know what's coming and then work your way backwards to say, what can I do today?
So one of the things I have loved about having you as a guest is you compel our fellow optometrists to think about less about just their ECP cap and about their CEO cap, and to understand you better and why you think that way. I want the audience to understand more about your early life. Your family were Afghan refugees. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened in your early years and how you came here to the U.S.?
Yeah, definitely. I think my drive for improving the retail experience comes from my father being an entrepreneur. He was in Afghanistan, and I lost him earlier this year. So he's a figurehead and so important to me, and really shaped how I thought. And how I, of course, through my upbringing, my father had a bookstore in Kabul, Afghanistan, and he had the most successful bookstore, had the contract with the king at the time, and really dealt with all the import and export of books that came into the country that got supplied to the schools and whatnot. And ultimately, he created the first library model of the country and said, hey, not everyone can afford these books, but everyone should have access to education. That was so important to him, probably why I became a doctor, actually. And so he started to kind of lease these books and say, hey, no payment required. Check it out. You're a student. Check it out. When you're done using it, bring it back. And so that was kind of his passion. Now, he was forced to get into business because his father died at a young age, and he was providing for his 6 siblings. But in the 80s, when I was a child, and I was in Afghanistan, a bomb hit our house. It was the Cold War, and a bomb hit our house while my mother, my sister, and I were still in the house, and we somehow miraculously survived it. And I was 9 months old at the time. And that's when we pretty much lost everything, hit that reset button and said, okay, we have to leave. The airport was bombed. So we made our way through the Himalayan mountains and got to India. We lived in the slums of Delhi for about 2 years, and as refugees, and then ultimately made our way to Hamburg, Germany, where we lived there for 2 years with my mother's uncle. I started preschool in Germany. I don't know any German. I didn't know any German. I still don't. And after about 2 years in Germany, we made our way to Amsterdam, and we were supposed to be there for only a few weeks. My mother only had a few $100 in her pocket, and but we were stuck there for about 8 months till we immigrated into the U.S. And became citizens right away, and lived in Flushing, New York, with my mother's other uncle. And then only about a year or so passed where we settled in California, and that's where I grew up, in the Bay Area. I grew up in the Bay Area pre-Silicon Valley, so I believe living in the Bay Area, being around kind of the tech guys, if you will, for better or worse, inspired me to start thinking differently. But I was 6 years old when I started working with my father. He said, hey, you're old enough to work, and I would get up every Saturday and Sunday at 3 a.m., and I would come home at 8 p.m. and we would work at the Oakland flea market. And so every Saturday and Sunday, while my friends were enjoying the weekend, I thought my weekends were hell. So I was like enjoying school. I said opposite schedule, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. This is so much better. I can't believe you guys don't like being here at school. And so I, worked with my dad, selling things. I started to pick up Spanish because we had a lot of Hispanic customers. And, that's what I did. And then we eventually opened a toy store in Oakland, California, not in the best part of Oakland. It was in East Oakland. There's a lot of dangerous activities that happen in that city, but that's where my dad had opened a toy store. And I was thrilled because now you don't have to go early and secure your spot like in a flea market. You have a leased space, and the mall opens at 9 a.m. So I was so excited. By the time I was 11, I was running that shop on occasion by myself. But everything that you can imagine that happens in East Oakland happens at a retail shop too, where you get exposed to knives and guns and things like this. But it allowed me to understand that that's the most difficult form of retail. There's other easier forms of retail, and I started thinking like a retailer very early on, and like a business person very early on. I opened my first business under my dad's name when I was 14. Which was an ice cream shop right next to my high school campus, because I thought, what a heck of an opportunity. We have off-campus lunch. There's all these food spots, but there's no dessert spot. So, and then that ended up being, and my dad said, fine, but you have to do it all. I put the tile down. I built the walk-in freezer, got the contract with the creamery, put the ads out, mostly newspapers, but, put the ads out for employees and things like that. So being my upbringing, it was easy for me to start thinking like a CEO early on, even though I wanted to become a doctor because I really cared about becoming an optometrist and caring for people. But I had the CEO hat on first. I was a businessman, I think, before I became an optometrist. And I believe a lot of our profession does the other way around.
That's very true. A little bit more about your family, your parents. You talked about your dad. I don't know if your mom was part of it, siblings. What was that unit like? What were you guys like as a unit at home?
I mean, very close, right? Very tight knit because of the hardships we faced early on. So for me, they were my why, they were my drive, they're why I can't quit. So my goal actually, it's funny. I think I was in 7th grade when I decided I'm going to become a doctor, so then I can take care of my parents. And so, that only happens when your childhood is not a normal childhood. You start thinking that way. And of course, when I went through school, I said, okay, first thing I'm going to do is buy my parents a house. And I was able to fulfill that dream first year out of optometry school. So, but I couldn't have done it without the sacrifices that we made as a unit. So my sister, as the person that introduced me to optometry, she was an office manager for our local optometrist. And she said, you're thinking about becoming a doctor. Why not an eye doctor? And as I start to shadow and learn more about it, I was like, oh, this might be something I want to do. And then if it wasn't for her staying at home, staying close to home and going to college nearby, locally, to help pay for rent and provide for our family, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to leave to go to school. And I went all the way to Ohio State. So this unit it's still a tight unit. We take care of each other. We financially take care of each other. So for me, this is what I always imagined, which is why I'm the proudest American you'll ever know.
You mentioned normal, right? What's a normal upbringing? And it seems to me like that was entirely normal. It was a drive to, make success. I don't know. I give your family incredible credit for every contribution it made along the way. I think we sometimes stereotype the kids sitting home watching Saturday morning cartoons as the ones that have it normal. But to your point, school is was your release when you were working at the flea market. So maybe it wasn't so normal.
Yeah, you're right, and I wouldn't change it for the world, right? So that made me who I am, and also makes me appreciate every little thing I have in life. So yeah, it was normal for me. I didn't know anything else.
Well, bless the memory of your father. And you were an athlete. Tell us about your college sports experience. I found that fascinating.
Yeah, I just always loved sports. In high school, I played basketball, I played football, volleyball. Three sports. And so year round, I was always doing something competitively. And then when I went to college, not being the tallest guy, not being the strongest guy, but I was kind of the faster guy. And then also being an athlete through all those years, I walked onto UC Davis's football team because I got into UC Davis. I didn't think about being an athlete, and I said, well, why not? Why not? I could do it. And really that, why not me mentality. And I did get a chance to walk onto the football team, but that was the year they went D1. So the coach was very honest with me. He said, look, you're a great kid. I like you. You probably won't get playing time for a number of years, maybe your 5th year. And I was thinking to myself, I can't afford to be an undergrad for 5 years. So I started to explore, and I found the boxing coach. And then the boxing coach, I told him, hey, look, I'm an athlete. I'd love to. And they're like, have you ever fought? I said, well, not really. I mean, you're talking about boxing. I said, but just give me a shot. I'll work harder than anyone, I promise. And he worked me out, and he said, hey, for your weight class, you just got to drop 20 pounds. But for that weight class, you've got quite a punch, and maybe we can make this work. But you're going to have to work really hard. And essentially, to fast forward, the next year I became captain of the boxing team, had a 19-1 record throughout my collegiate experience. there's something called the NCBA, the National Collegiate Boxing Association, which is the boxing league that kind of isn't controlled by the NCAA. And then USA Boxing takes everybody in as an amateur boxer. So you still have to sign the same papers and the same waivers that amateur boxers do outside of college.
Wow. And you've also coached sports over the years.
Yeah, because there's nothing. I started to learn later on in my career that the thing I enjoy most was education and actually educating. So that's why I'm a lifelong learner, so I can continue to kind of provide a different view, a different insight, a different perspective. And I love educating. So I said, why not try to shift, and change the way the next generation thinks about things. That I didn't have a lot of mentors growing up. So I always take the opportunity to be one if anyone asks. But yeah, I was the assistant coach to my alma mater, the high school that I went and played basketball in. I was assistant to the varsity, assistant coach in the varsity program, which also helped. Of course, my practice was only 5 minutes away. So it was great. We were getting all the athletes in. We were getting athletes from the entire league to come because, hey, that's also the coach. Hey, he's also the optometrist. So it really helped the business side of it. Of course, we know how important it is to be involved in our community. But yeah, that was one of the most special experiences. I wish I could still do it. But, life has me traveling too much these days.
Yeah. Well, back to your tech background, I know that your view of the future of the profession involves technology. We've already hit some of that. Let's talk now about artificial intelligence. How does AI become practically ingrained into the practice of eye care going forward?
Well, first we have to think about which problems we want to solve, and then we could think about which AI models, which AI tools exist to solve those problems. And if you we talked a little bit about the inefficiencies that exist in our practice today. AI can certainly help with that. And I don't think AI can replace doctors per se. It can make us more efficient. I do believe the doctors and practices who use AI will run a more well-oiled machine than those who do not. I mean, you start looking at even the phone systems today, the voice IP phones and others are starting to adopt where they have a chat bot that sounds very human-like, answering the phone, taking in and kind of triaging what they need. Maybe it's, I want to know if my glasses are in. Maybe it's, I want to make an appointment for my son. Maybe it's whatever it is. And if that being integrated into your practice management system, that being, again, voice IP telephones are a little more technologically advanced than your standard phones. That, integration and that kind of seamless way of communicating, that can help not just the patient get what they need more conveniently, but it'll help the practice too without being on the phone all the time and, having just the right amount of staff to do those other tasks that needs to be done for the patients that are in the office. So that's just one example. We also see the medical device companies starting to put AI into some of their diagnostic tools to help doctors come up with the differential a little faster or come up with certain insights. AI is really built on data. So we have a lot of data in here, and we have become data gatherers in the exam lane when we signed up to be empathetic human beings caring for other human beings. So instead of being data gatherers, AI will help us become more of what we always wanted to be, empathetic healthcare providers.
Yeah, I think you bring a good business example, clinical decision support. I also think patient education. We give ourselves more credit than we should for how much patient education we give. If we had done a good job, people today would understand eye care much better than they do. They would not mistake the word cataract for Cadillac. And I mean, how many other ways can we say it, right? So there are a lot of places where AI can be used to reduce the inefficiencies, as you pointed out throughout our chat today, and improve outcomes.
Yeah, and I agree with you. There's in patient education, there's a huge opportunity. I mean, right now, patients, you'd be surprised how many of your patients, and you've practiced for a long time, Scott. How many of our patients don't even know what that nearsightedness is myopia, right? And just something as simple as that. But look at the product side of our business. Do any of us, including doctors, actually know which lenses are in our glasses, and we usually have 10 or 12 pairs. No, but even the way the lens companies market these products, and they have a lot of scientific terminology, their R&D departments go to the fullest extent to prove the science of the optics of their lenses. Even that, it's not consumer friendly. So what it sounds like to the patient is you're trying to upsell me. But the truth is, if we were able to say, hey, these are the best glasses for engineers today because it helps with their fatigue. There are anti-fatigue lenses. For example, if the lens companies came out with marketing material that was more consumer friendly, think of what that actually feels like as a consumer. Oh my gosh, you heard me, you feel my problems, and you're actually giving me a product that solves for that. Doctors don't have the time to do that today. With lower reimbursement rates and having to see more patients, we don't have time to do all of that, but that's where we can hopefully get some support. And I believe AI can enable the way we can enable those companies to market their products differently too.
Yeah. So you talked about the importance of mentorship in your life and how you've been giving back to your community in many different ways over the years. But I also know you've been around some really amazing people in the profession that you probably credit with mentoring and influencing you. I know it's hard to mention names, but do any come to the tip of your tongue that you feel like really stood out as people that helped guide you and direct your efforts?
Yeah, I would say for sure there's people that come to mind immediately because I think about them all the time with gratitude. But there are also people who come to mind that indirectly paved the way for me. And I believe that actually, Scott, I believe you're one of those people that indirectly paved the way as an optometrist, building tech companies in our industry, showing the industry that sometimes doesn't always believe this, but we're more than optometrists. But the people that come to mind, of course, Ed Buffington is a mentor and someone who has really helped me understand, really navigate the industry as well, but understand relationships, nuances, um, think differently as well. Dr. Lori Lipyat is someone I would consider in that space as well, and a few others. The first CEO in the industry that I worked for was Steve Baker, who was leading Life India at the time. Somebody who really taught me how to be a CEO through his examples. So really, folks like this, but there are others too.
Yeah, I know. I always worry that we feel like we're going to leave somebody out, but those are some incredible people. You also picked yourself up by your bootstraps. You went ahead and got an MBA. Not every OD does that. In fact, there's a very limited number that do. Would you suggest ODs consider pursuing such themselves?
I think it depends on what their passion and drive and what they want to do with it. I mean, for me, it was very helpful because I knew I wanted to build my own startup someday. So I have to learn some business terminology, the nuances of investment, seed capital, structure, things like this, legal implications and whatnot, understanding product market fit when you build a product, understanding different sales business models in terms of for revenue. And I was very passionate about data monetization and said, look, data is the next, currency. So that's one of the things that drove me to say, oh no, I definitely want to do this. It depends what folks want to do. I believe having more optometrists that are, true CEOs and business minded would help our profession tremendously with the landscape of the vision industry today.
And much of what you said about what you learned through your MBA program applies to owning an independent eye care practice or even being a sublease holder at a corporate location. I mean, all those things you talked about, getting capital deployed in the right ways and understanding profit and loss. I mean, it applies to optometry. And I think that's what I'd like to emphasize out of what you did. You set an example that I hope the audience understands is a benchmark that might over time become the way that optometrists should think about educating themselves. And there are a lot of programs available to get these types of degrees. So I hope they follow in your footsteps.
Well, and others before me as well. I mean, if you think about, we want a seat at the table. for the decisions and the organizations that make decisions for our industry. So if we want a seat at the table, we have to have the knowledge and skill set that comes with being having that seat. And we have a perspective that large organizations can greatly benefit from, right? So that's why they bring ODs on as KOLs and others, right? But now we're starting to see a shift where these large industry organizations are hiring optometrists to be a part of their leadership team, to be a part of their, deployment team, operations team, and sales team even. So if there's all these new opportunities in terms of where we could take our career. So if you have a business, some form of business savviness to you as well, you're going to be more impactful in that role.
Yeah, I talk to optometry students about this all the time, that I think the way we thought going into optometry school we would use our degree is often much broader than our estimations on the way in. And so I appreciate you saying it that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. And a huge opportunity, we're actually, we think about optometry schools, we need optometrists, right? We talk about the need for medical eye care services is going up over the years. The net number of ophthalmologists is really kind of netting out to be the same for new grads and then those who retire. But the need for patients to get medical eye exams is going to increase. So we need our optometrists. We need those students to become optometrists because we'll be doing that. We'll be providing that medical care since there won't be other doctors that have the skill set and the niche and experience of being an eye care provider that we do. So imagine coupling that with this huge need for optometrists, coupling that with some business savviness, we could truly shift this industry to, and I believe if I truly believe if eye care practitioners ran the industry but had enough business savviness to them, there would be a lot more success all throughout because we come from like a care first perspective. And that's going to be our differentiating factor in a careless future that we are kind of headed towards, right?
Yeah, that's really well said. You kind of got to the last question before I asked it. I was going to ask you for a wrap up with words of encouragement. You've really given them. So let me turn my question a little bit. What is your hope? Not so much encouragement for others. You've just given that. What's your hope for the way that eye care consumers look at us in the industry in the year 2030 and 2040?
I would hope that consumers and patients alike, right? They look at us as the place that we get our care and have the best products that align with the care. So they don't look at it independently. They look at products and the care to be much more aligned. And you would say some doctors believe this is true today, but with the shift on what's happening on the retail side and the consumerism side, I would say we're drifting away from that. And I would hope that optometry practices are empowered with tools to keep up with the larger enterprises and make that more accessible to them, and that they're open-minded to implement these tools and these technologies so then they can keep up and thrive in an ever-changing world.
Hope that comes from open-mindedness that allows us to thrive. Dr. Masoud Nafey, I can't think of a better way to summarize how you've done what you've done. Thank you so much for telling your amazing stories on this episode of Sandbox Stories.
It was an honor to be here with you, Scott. Thank you so much.
And to the audience, thanks for attending and listening to Masoud's fantastic stories. Until my next Sandbox Story, be great at all you do.